The crisp October air carried whispers through Pinecrest, a place where pine-scented breezes usually brought comfort rather than dread. Sheriff Liam Connolly stood at the edge of Whispering Lake, watching as search teams combed through the surrounding woods for the fifth consecutive day. 20-year-old Sarah Mitchell had vanished without a trace last Friday night after leaving the Harvest Festival, and with each passing hour, Liam felt the weight of responsibility pressing harder against his chest. "Sheriff, we've covered the eastern trails again." "Nothing," Deputy Martinez reported, her voice betraying the exhaustion they all felt. Liam nodded, his weathered face remaining stoic despite the churning in his gut. 6 years ago, he'd left his detective position in Chicago after a missing persons case went tragically wrong. A young woman found too late because he'd followed the wrong lead. He'd sought refuge in Pinecrest, his grandfather's hometown, hoping small-town policing would offer redemption. Now history seemed determined to repeat itself. "Expand the grid another mile east. And get me those phone records," he ordered, scanning the tree line as if Sarah might suddenly emerge from between the flame-colored maples. The town of 4,800 souls had transformed overnight. Doors now locked, children kept close, neighbors eyeing each other with newfound suspicion. At the volunteer center, Emily Mitchell sorted through maps with trembling hands. 3 years older than her missing sister, Emily had always been the practical one, the accountant who'd returned from Boston when their father died to help their mother run the family hardware store. "These sections were covered yesterday," she told Liam when he entered, her voice sharp with barely contained frustration. "We're wasting time going over the same ground." "Emily, my team is following protocol." "Your protocol isn't finding my sister," she snapped, then closed her eyes briefly. "Sorry, I can't sit around waiting for news. I need to do something." Liam understood that impulse all too well. "I know, but I need you to trust me. We have new information." He hesitated before continuing. "Sarah's boyfriend, Jason, finally admitted they had an argument at the festival. He wasn't the last person to see her." Emily's eyes widened. "What?" "He told me everything was fine when I called him Saturday morning." "Who saw her after?" "Carl Whitman claims he gave her a ride partway home, said she asked to be dropped at the old Miller property, not at your house." "That makes no sense. The Miller place has been abandoned for years. Why would she go there?" The question hung between them, unanswered and ominous. Outside, a church bell tolled 5 times, and volunteers began returning for the evening debriefing. Pinecrest was traditionally a town where people left their doors unlocked and neighbors watched out for one another, a sanctuary from the dangers of the cities many residents had fled. Now that illusion of safety was shattered. That night, after the search was suspended until morning, Liam sat in his office reviewing statements. The photograph of Sarah on his desk showed a young woman with bright eyes and an easy smile, a sophomore at the community college studying environmental science. Well-liked, responsible, no history of running away. The kind of girl who volunteered at the animal shelter and coached Little League. Nothing about her disappearance made sense. His phone rang, breaking his concentration. "Sheriff Connolly." "Liam." Emily's voice was different, controlled, but with an undercurrent of something that made him sit up straight. "I found something in Sarah's room. A hidden notebook. There are entries about the old Miller property, about meeting someone there. And there's more. Something about knowing what really happened to Lisa Cooper." Liam's blood ran cold. Lisa Cooper's drowning 3 years ago had been ruled accidental, but rumors had persisted. "I'll be right there," he said, already reaching for his jacket. As he drove through the sleeping town, past darkened storefronts and homes where lights still burned late into the night, he couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah's disappearance was just the surface ripple of something much deeper and darker lurking in the waters of Pinecrest. By the time he pulled into the Mitchells' driveway, rain had started to fall, gentle at first but quickly intensifying, as if nature itself was conspiring to wash away any remaining traces of Sarah. Mrs. Mitchell let him in without a word, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow. Emily was waiting in the kitchen, the notebook open on the table between them. As Liam read through Sarah's increasingly alarmed entries from the past month, he realized that whatever secrets Pinecrest had been keeping were no longer safely buried, and someone might have decided that Sarah Mitchell knew too much. Dawn broke reluctantly over Pinecrest, the sun struggling to penetrate the thick blanket of clouds that had settled over the valley overnight. Liam sat in his Bronco outside the abandoned Miller property, rain drumming steadily on the roof as he studied Sarah's notebook entries through increasingly troubled eyes. The final entry, dated the day before her disappearance, was particularly disturbing. "Meeting C tonight after the festival. He says he has proof. If what he's showing me is real, nothing in this town will ever be the same." The old Miller house stood a quarter-mile from the road, its Victorian frame sagging under decades of neglect. Once the proud home of the town's founding family, it had fallen into disrepair after the last Miller died, without heirs in the late 1980s. Property disputes had left it in limbo, not quite abandoned, but never reclaimed. A perfect place for secrets. "Sheriff?" Deputy Martinez's voice crackled over the radio. "The forensic team from the county is here. Want me to send them your way?" "Affirmative. And Carla? Don't mention the notebook to anyone yet." The C from Sarah's entry could be Carl Whitman, who'd admitted giving her a ride, but Liam's instincts told him they were missing something. Carl, a middle-aged mechanic with no criminal record, seemed an unlikely confidant for a college sophomore. As Liam stepped out into the rain, his boots sinking into the muddy driveway, he noticed fresh tire tracks, partially washed away by the downpour. Inside the house, floorboards creaked ominously under his weight. Dust covered most surfaces, but there were clear signs of recent activity. Footprints, a discarded coffee cup, a folding chair positioned near a window overlooking the back property. Liam moved methodically through the rooms, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom until he reached what had once been a study. There, pinned to a decaying corkboard, was a map of Pinecrest with several locations circled, including Whispering Lake, where Lisa Cooper had drowned. His phone vibrated. "Emily." "I've been going through Sarah's computer," she said without preamble. "She's been researching water contamination reports for a class project. There's a folder full of data about chemical levels in Whispering Lake going back 5 years. Any connection to Lisa Cooper?" "Not directly, but—" Emily hesitated. "Lisa's father worked for Agritech before the accident. They have a research facility upstream from where she drowned. Agritech had come to Pinecrest 7 years ago, bringing jobs and economic revival to a town struggling after the textile mill closed. Councilman James Porter had been instrumental in bringing them in, the same James Porter who owned half the commercial real estate in town and was currently spearheading a major tourism development project centered around Whispering Lake. The forensic team arrived, breaking Liam's train of thought. As they set up equipment, his phone rang again. The station. "Sheriff, we've got something. Jason Thompson just came in with Sarah's backpack. Says he found it this morning near the old boathouse. And, sir, there's blood on it." By noon, the rain had stopped, but a heavy fog had settled over the lake, obscuring the shoreline where technicians were now carefully documenting and collecting evidence. The backpack contained Sarah's wallet, keys, and phone, but also a USB drive hidden in a secret compartment. Back at the station, Liam plugged it into his computer, Emily looking over his shoulder. "These are water testing results," she murmured as dozens of files appeared. "Independent samples, not the official ones from the Environmental Protection Agency." Her finger traced across the screen. "Look at these dates. They correspond with illness clusters in town over the past 3 years. And this one," she pointed to a file dated 3 days before Lisa Cooper's drowning, "extreme toxicity levels, right where Lisa was swimming. If Agritech was dumping chemicals and someone discovered it, like Lisa's father, or my sister." Emily's voice broke. "Liam, we need to find Sarah now." As if on cue, Deputy Martinez burst into the office. "Sheriff, we just got a call from Carl Whitman's neighbor. Says she heard screaming from his house last night, but thought it was just the TV. When she went over to borrow something this morning, no one answered, but his car's there and the back door was wide open. Liam was already reaching for his gun. Get a warrant for Whitman's place. And Emily, he turned to her, his expression grave. Go to your mother's house and stay there, lock the doors. But Emily shook her head, her jaw set in a familiar, stubborn line. No, Sarah found this information because she cared about the truth and this town. I'm not hiding while she's still out there. Before Liam could argue, his phone rang again. The caller ID showed Councilman Porter. Sheriff, the politician's smooth voice came through. I understand you're investigating the Miller property. I'd like to remind you that's private land now, purchased by the Development Corporation last month. You'll need special permission to... Councilman, Liam cut him off, I'm executing a missing persons investigation, and I think we need to have a conversation about agritech, water quality reports, and why my missing person was researching chemical contamination right before she vanished. The silence on the other end stretched for 3 long seconds. I see, Porter finally said, his tone completely changed. Perhaps we should discuss this privately, Sheriff. There are economic considerations for the town that need to be factored in. I'm sure we can come to an arrangement that satisfies everyone. As Liam hung up, the pieces were starting to align with terrible clarity. The town's economic revival, Porter's development deals, Agritech's presence, Lisa Cooper's accident, and now Sarah's disappearance, all connected by toxic secrets flowing beneath Pinecrest's picture-perfect surface. And somewhere out there, possibly at Carl Whitman's house, Sarah Mitchell might be running out of time. Carl Whitman's modest ranch house sat on 3 acres at the edge of town, a rusting Ford pickup in the driveway, and a no trespassing sign swinging from a post at the entrance. As Liam and 2 deputies approached with weapons drawn, the eerie silence was broken only by the distant barking of Whitman's German shepherd, locked in an outdoor kennel behind the house. "Whitman, this is Sheriff Connolly. We have a warrant." Liam's voice echoed across the property, met with nothing but the continued frantic barking. After the proper protocol, and still no response, they breached the front door. The interior told a story of struggle, an overturned coffee table, broken lamp, and smears of what looked like blood leading toward the kitchen. "Check the outbuildings," Liam ordered one deputy, while he and Martinez continued through the house, room by room, finding no one. In the basement, they discovered a makeshift laboratory. Water samples labeled with dates and locations lined metal shelving units. Maps similar to the one at the Miller house were pinned to the walls, along with newspaper clippings about local illness clusters and Lisa Cooper's drowning. A desk in the corner held a laptop and stacks of documentation. Environmental impact reports with sections highlighted, correspondence with state officials, all bearing Carl Whitman's name. "He wasn't just a mechanic," Martinez murmured, leafing through the papers. "These are professional analysis reports. He was an environmental engineer." Liam's phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "Checked county records. Carl Whitman moved here 4 years ago. Before that, he worked for the EPA. Sarah interviewed him for her project." The pieces shifted again in Liam's mind. Not Carl abducting Sarah, but both of them targeted by someone else, someone with much more to lose. His gaze fell on a bulletin board where a photograph showed a younger Carl standing beside another man at what appeared to be a conference. The second man was unmistakably Robert Mitchell, Sarah and Emily's late father. "Sheriff," the deputy called from outside, "tire tracks leading into the woods, recent ones." The tracks led to a maintenance road that serviced the water treatment facility, a route that would bypass the main security gate at Agritech. Liam made a quick decision. "Martinez, take what we found to Judge Harmon. Get warrants for Agritech's facility and Porter's office and home. I'm following these tracks. Alone. Protocol says, we don't have time for protocol." The memory of finding that Chicago girl too late flashed through his mind. "Call for county backup, but I'm going now." The maintenance road wound through dense woodland before emerging at the rear of Agritech's sprawling facility. Security was minimal here, just a chain-link fence with a padlocked gate that showed signs of recent cutting. Inside the perimeter, Liam moved cautiously between storage tanks and equipment sheds, following fresh footprints in the mud toward a low concrete building marked Water Treatment, Authorized Personnel Only. The door was ajar. Inside, the harsh fluorescent lighting revealed an industrial space filled with pumps, filters, and monitoring equipment. And there, zip-tied to a pipe along the back wall, was Carl Whitman, his face bloodied but his eyes alert. When he saw Liam, relief washed over his features. "Sheriff, thank God. They've got Sarah too, separate building. Testing facility on the north side." "Who's they, Carl?" Liam asked, cutting the zip ties. "Porter and his security chief, Reynolds. I've been collecting evidence for years. Porter's been paying Agritech to look the other way while they dump untreated chemicals. When the EPA started asking questions 3 years ago, they falsified reports. Lisa Cooper's father suspected something, started taking independent samples. After he died in that car accident, I picked up where he left off. And Sarah discovered your research." Carl nodded, wincing as he rubbed his wrists. "She found me through old emails to her father. We've been documenting everything for months. 2 days ago, we finally got proof, internal memos, showing Porter knew about the contamination all along. He's been buying up affected properties cheap through shell companies, planning to flip them once the cleanup he's privately funding is complete. And killing anyone who might expose him before that happens," Liam concluded grimly. A sudden noise from outside froze them both. Footsteps approaching. Liam motioned Carl to silence and positioned himself beside the door, gun ready. When it swung open, he found himself face to face not with Porter or security, but with Emily Mitchell. "Jesus, Emily! I told you to stay put." "And I ignored you," she replied, unfazed. "I found something in my father's old files. A map of this facility with all the access points marked. He was investigating them before he died." Before Liam could respond, his radio crackled. "Sheriff!" Martinez's voice came through, tense and low. "County SWAT is 15 minutes out, but we've got movement at the main gate. Looks like Porter and several men loading equipment into trucks. They're clearing out." They must have been tipped off about the warrants," Liam muttered. "Emily, stay with Carl. I'm going to find Sarah." But Emily was already moving toward the door. "That's my sister. I'm coming." The testing facility stood 100 yards away across an open area of concrete. As they approached, staying low behind equipment and vehicles, the main door opened. James Porter emerged, followed by his head of security dragging a stumbling figure between them, Sarah Mitchell, alive but clearly injured. "They're taking her to the trucks," Emily whispered, her voice tight with fear and rage. "We have to stop them now." Liam assessed their options rapidly. SWAT was still minutes away. Porter and his men were armed. A direct confrontation could get Sarah killed. But if they reached the trucks, "I need a distraction," he decided, outlining a hasty plan. As Carl headed toward the facility's control room to trigger emergency protocols, Liam and Emily circled toward the loading area where 3 trucks waited, engines running. Suddenly, alarms blared across the compound. Emergency lights flashed, and the facility's sprinkler system activated, sending workers rushing in all directions. In the confusion, Porter and Reynolds hesitated, looking around frantically while maintaining their grip on Sarah. "Now," Liam whispered, breaking cover. "Police! Drop your weapons and release her!" What followed was chaos. Reynolds shoving Sarah aside to draw his weapon. Porter making a dash for the nearest truck, workers scattering for cover. Liam focused on Reynolds, taking him down with a carefully placed shot to the shoulder, while Emily raced toward her sister. Porter reached the truck and was pulling away when the gates ahead suddenly closed. Carl's work from the control room. Trapped, the councilman abandoned the vehicle and ran toward the woods, disappearing into the tree line. "Sarah!" Emily reached her sister, cradling her as she checked for injuries. "Are you okay?" Sarah nodded weakly, her face bruised but her eyes clear. "The evidence," she managed. "In my jacket. We got it all, Em. Everything Dad was working on." As SWAT and county officers swarmed the facility, securing the scene and arresting Agritech executives, Liam organized a search for Porter. The man's desperation made him dangerous, and the woods offered too many places to hide. But as darkness began to fall, a priority took shape in Liam's mind that superseded even capturing Porter, ensuring the Mitchell sisters' safety. He found them sitting together in an ambulance, Sarah being treated for dehydration and minor injuries, while Emily held her hand, unwilling to let go. When they saw him approach, both women straightened. "We need to get you somewhere secure," he told them. "Porter's still out there, and he knows you have evidence that could send him to prison for decades." Sarah's gaze was steady despite her ordeal. "We're not hiding, Sheriff. Not anymore. This town has lived with secrets long enough." As Liam looked at the sisters, their determination a mirror of their father's courage, he knew Pinecrest was standing at a crossroads. The path forward would be difficult, exposing corruption that had touched nearly every aspect of town life. But for the first time since he'd arrived seeking redemption, Liam felt the weight on his chest begin to lighten. Whatever came next, the truth would no longer remain submerged in the dark waters of Whispering Lake. The Pinecrest Gazette ran a special edition the following morning, with a headline that would be remembered for years to come. "Toxic Truths, Corruption Exposed at Heart of Town's Revival." Sarah Mitchell's photograph appeared alongside Carl Whitman's, both hailed as whistleblowers who had risked everything to expose the environmental scandal. By noon, state environmental officials and FBI agents had descended on Agritech's facility, sealing it off as a crime scene, while specialized teams began testing water sources throughout the area. James Porter remained at large, the subject of a multi-state manhunt. His assets had been frozen, his reputation in tatters as preliminary evidence confirmed what Sarah and Carl had discovered. A deliberate cover-up of toxic contamination that had likely contributed to dozens of illnesses and at least 3 deaths over the past 5 years, including Lisa Cooper's. At the sheriff's office, Liam coordinated with federal authorities while keeping a protective detail on the Mitchell home. Sarah's evidence, combined with Carl's years of independent research and documents recovered from Porter's office, painted a damning picture of corporate greed and political corruption reaching beyond Pinecrest to state regulatory agencies. "The governor's office just issued a statement," Deputy Martinez reported, entering Liam's office with a printout. "They're announcing an independent investigation into all Agritech facilities statewide and a review of environmental enforcement procedures." Liam nodded, unsurprised by the political damage control already underway. "Any word on the search teams near the Canadian border?" "Nothing concrete, but Porter's yacht was found abandoned at a marina in Michigan. They think he might have paid someone to take him across the lake." The door opened again, and Emily Mitchell walked in, looking exhausted but determined. Over the past 48 hours, she had emerged as the public face of the victims' families, her accounting background proving invaluable in tracing Porter's financial maneuvers. "How's Sarah?" Liam asked, offering her a chair. "Resting. The doctor says the chemical exposure was minimal, thankfully." Emily placed a folder on his desk. "These are the property records I mentioned. Porter's shell companies have acquired 27 parcels around Whispering Lake in the last 3 years, all at well below market value. Most of the sellers reported health concerns before moving." Liam leafed through the documents, adding another piece to the puzzle. He was creating his own private toxic waste site, then planning to clean it up and develop luxury properties once Agritech's operations were moved offshore next year. "And my father figured it out," Emily said softly. "His heart attack came the day after he met with state officials about his concerns." The implication hung heavily in the air. Robert Mitchell's death, officially attributed to natural causes, now appeared suspicious in light of everything they'd learned. Liam made a mental note to request that the case be reopened as part of the broader investigation. By early evening, a community meeting had been hastily organized at the high school gymnasium. Nearly half the town turned out, faces reflecting a mixture of anger, confusion, and fear. Liam stood at the back, watching as health officials explained testing protocols and medical monitoring programs being established for residents. When Sarah entered with Emily, a spontaneous round of applause broke out, acknowledging the courage it had taken to expose the truth. "Sheriff," a voice spoke beside him. Liam turned to find Carl Whitman, his face still bruised but standing taller now that his years of solitary investigation had been validated. "I've been offered a position with the EPA task force assigned to the cleanup. They want someone who knows what we're dealing with." "You'll take it?" Carl nodded. "Someone needs to make sure this gets done right this time. No shortcuts, no cover-ups." As the meeting progressed, Liam observed the community beginning the difficult process of reconciliation. Neighbors who had viewed each other with suspicion days earlier now exchanged information about testing locations and support resources. The revelation of Porter's betrayal had wounded Pinecrest deeply, but it had also created an opportunity for genuine healing. Later that night, Liam returned to the shore of Whispering Lake, where the search for Porter had been suspended until morning. Yellow crime scene tape cordoned off areas where soil samples were being collected, the peaceful setting now transformed into a testament to environmental negligence. He stood watching the moonlight on the water, thinking about redemption, not just his own, but an entire town's. His phone rang, an unknown number. When he answered, the voice on the other end chilled him despite the mild evening. "You've made a serious mistake, Sheriff," James Porter said, his usual smooth tones now hardened with malice. "This isn't over. People like us always land on our feet. People like you and those Mitchell girls, you'll be forgotten footnotes." "Where are you, Porter?" Liam asked calmly, signaling to a nearby deputy to begin tracing the call. A cold laugh came through the line. "Far enough away that you'll never find me, but close enough that I can still influence events in Pinecrest. Remember that?" The call ended abruptly. The deputy shook his head. Not enough time for a trace. Liam pocketed his phone, Porter's threat echoing in his mind. He'd encountered men like Porter before, wealthy, connected, accustomed to impunity. They rarely surrendered their power without a fight. 3 days later, as federal agents continued their investigation, Liam received the ballistics report he'd been waiting for. The bullet recovered from Reynolds's shoulder matched a weapon registered to Porter, physical evidence that would strengthen the attempted murder charges once he was apprehended. It was a small victory, but significant. At the Mitchell home, recovery was proceeding in careful steps. Sarah had begun compiling a comprehensive report of her findings for the class project that had unexpectedly evolved into an exposé. Emily had returned to managing the family hardware store, which had become an impromptu community center, as residents sought trusted information about the unfolding situation. "We're thinking of starting a foundation," Sarah told Liam when he stopped by to check on them, "for environmental monitoring and support for families affected by the contamination. Dad would have wanted that." "I think that's exactly what this town needs," Liam agreed. "Leadership that puts people first." As he prepared to leave, Emily walked him to the door. "The FBI called this morning," she said quietly. "They found Porter's passport in Toronto. They think he's left the country." Liam nodded, unsurprised. "He won't be able to hide forever. Men like that need the spotlight too much. Does it bother you that he might get away, at least for now?" Liam considered the question seriously. 6 years ago in Chicago, such an outcome would have consumed him with frustration. But now, looking at what had been accomplished, a dangerous cover-up exposed, a community beginning to heal, justice in process, even if not yet complete, he found his perspective had shifted. "What matters is that the truth came out," he finally answered. "Porter took away your father, and nearly took Sarah too, but he didn't get what he ultimately wanted, to bury the evidence and cash in on people's suffering. That's a victory worth acknowledging." Emily studied him for a moment, then nodded. "You're different from when all this started, you know, less haunted." Liam smiled slightly. "Maybe we all are." 1 week after Sarah's rescue, Pinecrest held a memorial service for those whose illnesses were now linked to the contamination, including Lisa Cooper. The church overflowed with residents united in grief and resolve. Afterward, a procession walked to Whispering Lake, where cleanup efforts were visibly underway. There, as the autumn sun began to set, Sarah Mitchell stood before her neighbors and made a promise that would define Pinecrest's future. What happened here isn't just about corporate greed or one man's corruption, she said, her voice carrying across the gathered crowd. It's about what happens when we stop paying attention to what matters most: our health, our environment, our responsibility to each other. My father believed that transparency and accountability were the foundations of a true community. Today, we begin rebuilding Pinecrest on those principles. As lanterns were lit and set afloat on the water in remembrance, Liam stood with Carl and the Mitchell sisters, watching the lights drift across the darkening surface. The disappearance that had left a town in panic had ultimately led to its awakening. And though James Porter remained beyond their reach for now, his power over Pinecrest had been permanently broken, not by any single hero, but by ordinary people who had refused to let the truth remain submerged. In the coming months, as remediation efforts progressed and investigations continued, Liam would often return to this moment. The quiet determination on Sarah's face, the steady presence of Emily beside her. The community gathered at the shore of a lake that would, in time, heal along with the town it had sustained for generations. It wasn't the perfect resolution he might once have demanded, but it was something equally valuable, a chance for Pinecrest to confront its past honestly and choose a different future. And for a man who had come seeking redemption in the quiet rhythms of small-town life, it was perhaps enough.